The soft light in the dressing room made everything feel like a dream. She stood there, holding the white dress in her hands. It was elegant, simple, and beautiful. She had bought it months ago, thinking it would be perfect for the day. Her daughter's wedding. A day she had dreamed about since the moment her little girl was born. She smiled softly, imagining how proud she would feel walking into the hall, seeing her daughter start a new life, and feeling like she was a part of it. Then the door opened. Her daughter stepped inside, her face calm but cold. The makeup artists and bridesmaids glanced up but quickly looked away. The air in the room shifted. Her daughter walked over and took her gently by the arm. There was a forced smile on her face, but her eyes were hard. "Mom," she said softly but firmly, "you can't wear white." She blinked, not understanding at first. "But I thought." Her daughter cut her off. "It's not your day. White is for the bride." She glanced nervously at the others in the room who were now watching, pretending not to listen. The whispers began, quiet but sharp. The dress in her hand suddenly felt heavy. Her fingers gripped the soft fabric, trying to hold on to her dignity. She opened her mouth to speak but found no words. Her throat tightened. She had never imagined this moment would feel so cold. She had paid for everything, the venue, the catering, the flowers, even the dress her daughter was wearing. And yet, here she was, being told she was too much, too noticeable, too bright for her own daughter's wedding. One of the bridesmaids stepped forward, her voice light but dismissive. "We've picked out something for you. Beige. It's quiet, simple. You'll look elegant but you won't take attention away." The beige dress was held out to her like a peace offering. But it felt more like a punishment. She stared at it, her eyes stinging. She didn't want to cause a scene. She didn't want to ruin her daughter's big day. So she smiled, or tried to, and nodded slowly. "Of course," she whispered. "Whatever you think is best." Her daughter smiled again, this time more relaxed, as if a problem had been solved. The others in the room returned to their conversations, their laughter floating in the air like nothing had happened. She took the beige dress in her hands. The white one was gently pulled away by a bridesmaid, folded carefully, and set aside like it never belonged to her. She stood still for a moment, breathing slowly, trying to swallow the lump in her throat. The room blurred slightly as tears threatened to fall. But she wouldn't cry. Not here. Not now. With her head held high, she turned and walked toward the small changing room. Every step felt heavier than the last. Inside, away from the eyes, she let her hands tremble for just a moment. She pressed her lips together, held back the tears, and whispered to herself, "It's fine. I'm fine." She dressed in beige. The soft beige fabric clung to her skin as she stared at her reflection. The woman in the mirror looked small, almost invisible. She tried to smile but couldn't quite find the strength. Her mind drifted back, to the years that had led to this moment. She had worked late nights for most of her life. Long shifts at the diner, tired feet carrying heavy trays, the constant ringing of the cash register in her ears. She would come home exhausted, her back aching, but her heart full whenever she peeked into her daughter's room. She'd watch her sleep peacefully, tiny hands clutching her stuffed rabbit. Every sacrifice felt worth it in those moments. There were so many things she had skipped for herself. New clothes, vacations, even simple nights out with friends. Instead, she saved every penny. The school trips her daughter wanted to join, the piano lessons she begged for, the tutoring sessions before college applications, she made sure her little girl had them all. She'd clip coupons, shop sales, and take on extra shifts. When her daughter wanted a new dress for prom, she picked up another weekend job to make it happen. Weddings had always been a special dream they shared. When her daughter was small, they would sit on the old couch, watching wedding shows together. She remembered brushing her daughter's hair as they watched, laughing and pointing at the beautiful gowns. One night, as she tucked her in, she whispered softly, "One day, you'll wear the dress I never could." Her daughter smiled sleepily, eyes full of trust and love. That memory stayed with her for years. When the wedding plan started, she was there every step of the way. They chose the venue together, walking through grand halls and floral gardens. She paid the deposit with money she had saved for years. They picked the flowers, the menu, even the perfect wedding cake. She watched her daughter's eyes sparkle with excitement, and each moment made her heart swell. She felt proud that she could give her everything she had once dreamed of. The wedding dress itself had been expensive. Her daughter fell in love with it the moment she tried it on. The price tag made her stomach turn, but she smiled and handed over her credit card without hesitation. She wanted her to feel beautiful. She wanted her to feel like a princess. She assured her daughter, "Don't worry about the cost. This is your day." Every detail was carefully chosen, every bill quietly paid. She never asked for thanks. She only wanted to see her daughter happy. That was always enough. But now, standing here in beige, she felt distant from it all. Like she had been placed on the sidelines of her own story. The other mothers laughed together in vibrant dresses, their voices filling the room. Bridesmaids adjusted their hair, chatting about the after-party. No one looked at her. No one asked how she felt. She was simply there. Her daughter had called her earlier that morning, before the chaos started. "Mom, just make sure everything's on schedule, okay?" Her voice was sweet but rushed, as if she were speaking to a wedding planner, not her mother. She had nodded and handled every last detail. The florist had arrived late, she fixed it. The caterer had a question, she answered it. The band couldn't find parking, she guided them. She handled everything so her daughter wouldn't have to worry. Now, as the music outside started playing, signaling the guests were arriving, she took one last look at herself. The beige dress was soft and quiet. Just like they wanted. Her daughter's words echoed again in her mind, "It's not your day." She had once believed this would be their day. A day to celebrate not just love, but everything they had overcome together. All the lonely nights, the empty wallets, the whispered promises. But instead, she stood here like an outsider, watching the life she had built unfold without her. A soft knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. "They're ready for you," a bridesmaid said gently. She smiled faintly, wiped the corner of her eye, and whispered to herself, "You've done enough. Just smile." She stepped out of the room and into the background of the day she had once dreamed of. The ceremony was already in full swing when she quietly slipped into her seat. She looked around and noticed where they had placed her, far in the back, almost by the exit doors. The guests near her weren't even close family. Distant cousins, old friends of her ex-husband, people who barely knew her daughter. She forced a smile as she nodded politely at a few faces that glanced her way. Her heart pounded a little as she tried to convince herself that it was just a mistake, maybe an oversight. Maybe the seating chart had gotten mixed up. But deep down, she knew better. She glanced ahead at the front rows, her ex-husband sat there proudly, his new wife glowing beside him, both of them beaming as if they had planned every detail themselves. The photographers hovered near them, snapping picture after picture, as if they were the stars of the show. She folded her hands tightly in her lap, feeling the smooth fabric of her beige dress between her fingers. She had practiced that smile in the mirror earlier, the one she wore now, calm and polite, hiding everything underneath. The smile that said, "I'm fine." The ceremony was beautiful, just like they had planned. The flowers she had paid for lined the aisle. The music she had chosen filled the air softly. The minister read words that once would have brought tears of joy to her eyes. Now, they only added weight to her chest. When the vows ended and the crowd erupted into applause, she clapped too, careful to match the enthusiasm around her. But her hands trembled slightly, and she quickly rested them back in her lap. She watched her daughter and new son-in-law walk back down the aisle, hand in hand, smiling wide. The guests around her stood up, cheering and taking photos. The reception followed, and she stayed quiet, trying to blend into the sea of guests. The ballroom was filled with laughter, music, and clinking glasses. Every detail was perfect. She recognized every flower arrangement, every chair cover, every little piece of decor she had paid for, chosen with love. Yet, she felt invisible in the middle of it all. As the speeches began, she leaned forward slightly, hoping, maybe, just maybe, she would hear her name. The best man spoke first, cracking jokes and praising the couple's love story. Then the maid of honor stood up, telling sweet stories from childhood and teenage years. She smiled gently as memories floated back, school plays, late-night talks, birthday parties she had organized. Surely, they would mention her now. But they didn't. Instead, her daughter took the microphone herself, voice soft and emotional. "I just want to thank everyone who's been there for me. Dad, you've always supported me and taught me so much. And to my wonderful stepmom, thank you for welcoming me into your family and helping me plan every little detail of today." The room erupted in applause again. She sat frozen, hands clenched in her lap. Her chest tightened, but she held her face steady. Her cheeks burned as if the spotlight was suddenly on her absence. There was no mention of the years she had carried them both. No word about the sacrifices. Nothing. She felt a small tear forming but blinked it away quickly. No one was looking at her anyway. Later, as she made her way quietly toward the refreshment table, she accidentally overheard her daughter talking to a group of bridesmaids nearby. Their voices were low, but clear enough. "She always makes things about herself," her daughter said, laughing softly. "I just didn't want any drama today. This day is about me, not her." One of the bridesmaids giggled. "You handled it perfectly. She seems calm at least." Her breath caught in her throat. She stepped back quietly, trying not to make a sound. The laughter from the group continued, unaware that she had heard every word. The words cut deeper than any insult could. After everything, after every sacrifice, every late night, every dream she had given up, it came down to this. She was a burden, someone to manage, not a mother to be honored. She turned away and walked back to her seat. The noise of the party faded in her ears as her mind filled with a cold emptiness. The polite smile stayed on her face like a mask, but inside, something quietly crumbled. Something fragile that she had carried for years, hoping one day it would finally be seen, finally be valued. She sat there, alone in the middle of the celebration she had built. And in that moment, something inside her quietly died. The wedding was over, but the silence that followed was even louder. Days passed, then weeks. The house was quiet, too quiet. No phone calls. No messages. No photos from the honeymoon, no thank you card, no small note of gratitude. She checked her phone often, hoping to see her daughter's name light up the screen. But it stayed dark. She tried to give it time. Maybe they were busy settling into married life. Maybe her daughter was just adjusting to this new chapter. She told herself not to overthink, not to expect too much too soon. But the silence stretched longer and longer, turning from days into weeks. Each morning, she woke up hoping today would be the day her daughter would call. Each night, she went to bed with the same empty phone. One afternoon, she gathered her courage and texted her daughter. A simple message. "Hi, sweetheart. Just checking in. Hope you're doing well. Miss you." She stared at the screen, waiting for the little typing bubbles to appear. But they never came. Hours passed. Then a full day. Then another. The message remained unopened. A few days later, she tried again. "I'd love to see you sometime. Let me know when you're free." Again, nothing. The ache in her chest grew heavier. She sat at the kitchen table, staring at her cup of tea, the steam rising slowly into the empty room. The walls felt like they were closing in, the silence pressing on her ears. The house that once held laughter and life now felt cold, like a museum of memories. She decided to visit. She baked her daughter's favorite pie, the one she used to make every year on her birthday. As she drove to the apartment, her heart pounded with nervous hope. Maybe seeing each other face to face would ease whatever distance had grown between them. She knocked softly on the door, pie in hand. After a moment, the door opened just a crack. Her daughter stood there, looking surprised. Behind her, voices and laughter drifted from inside, the sound of friends, maybe her husband's family. "Mom, you should have called first," her daughter said, her voice strained. "I did, sweetheart. I texted. I just wanted to see you." Her daughter glanced behind her, as if embarrassed. "It's not really a good time right now. We're kind of busy. Maybe another day, okay?" The door closed gently but firmly. She stood there for a moment, holding the pie, her fingers tightening around the edges of the pan. She turned and walked back to her car, the laughter from inside still ringing in her ears. The drive home was long and quiet. The streetlights blurred as tears filled her eyes. She tried to blink them away, tried to stay strong, but the emptiness inside her grew heavier. Back home, the house welcomed her with its usual stillness. She placed the untouched pie on the kitchen counter and sat down. The stack of receipts from the wedding still sat in a neat pile on the dining table, proof of every dollar spent, every sacrifice made. She had kept them all, thinking maybe one day they'd sit together, looking back and laughing about how much it all cost. But now, they were just paper. Cold, meaningless paper. Even her friends had started to pull away. The calls stopped coming. The invitations grew fewer. No one asked how she was doing. Family members who once filled her home with noise and life now only sent the occasional forwarded message or a quick "hope you're well" text. They had all moved on. The wedding was over. The celebration was done. And so was their attention. She wandered the house aimlessly, touching framed photos along the walls. Pictures of birthdays, holidays, school plays, and graduations, all moments she had lived for. She whispered softly to the empty rooms, "Where did everyone go?" The answer came in silence. Each day bled into the next, each night colder than the one before. The ache in her chest no longer felt sharp, it was dull now, heavy, like a permanent stone inside her. She sat alone with her memories, her regrets, and the quiet that never left. The world had moved on. But she was still here. Alone. The days blended into each other. Morning came, evening fell, and the silence wrapped itself around her like a heavy blanket. She moved through the house like a ghost, her steps quiet, her hands empty. But then, one rainy afternoon, while cleaning out the old closet in the guest room, she stumbled across something she hadn't seen in years. It was a plain, dusty box sitting on the top shelf, hidden behind old winter coats and unused holiday decorations. She pulled it down carefully, brushing off the thin layer of dust that clung to the lid. Her fingers trembled slightly as she lifted it open. Inside were pieces of a life she had almost forgotten. There, lying neatly folded, was her old wedding scrapbook. The cover was worn, but the gold lettering still shimmered faintly under the soft light. She opened it, page by page, and memories rushed back like a gentle wave. The photos of her in her simple wedding gown, smiling shyly next to the man she once thought she'd grow old with. The dried flowers she had pressed between the pages. The handwritten notes about venues, menus, and guest lists. She smiled softly, her fingertips tracing the edges of old Polaroids. There was warmth in these pages, and for the first time in weeks, her chest didn't feel as heavy. She had forgotten how much love and hope had once filled her life, even if it hadn't lasted the way she imagined. Tucked beneath the scrapbook was a small envelope. Curious, she opened it. Inside were a few travel vouchers, unused, untouched, their expiration dates still far ahead. She remembered them now. Years ago, when the divorce was final, she had purchased these vouchers as a small promise to herself. Back then, she had thought, when things settle down, I'll go somewhere. Just for me. But she never did. Life got busy. Her daughter needed her. Bills needed to be paid. The vouchers had quietly waited, just like she had. At the very bottom of the box, almost forgotten, was a single folded piece of paper. The handwriting on the front was her own. She unfolded it carefully, her eyes scanning the words she had written to herself years ago. One day, do something just for you. Not for anyone else. Not for approval. Not for thanks. Just for you. You are allowed to live, too. Her breath caught in her throat. The words were simple, but they hit something deep inside. She read them again and again, as if reading a secret she had long buried. The rain outside tapped softly against the window, as if urging her to listen. She sat still for a while, letting the words sink in. The house was quiet, but this silence felt different. It didn't feel as heavy. It felt peaceful. She stood up slowly and walked to the mirror across the room. The woman staring back at her looked older. Her hair had more gray strands now. The lines around her eyes were deeper. She was tired, anyone could see that. But as she looked closer, she also saw something else. She was still standing. After everything, she was still here. She touched her reflection gently, as if to remind herself that she was real. The world may have moved on without her. Her daughter may have chosen to forget everything they shared. Friends and family may have disappeared. But she was still here. Breathing. Alive. Her lips curled into a soft, quiet smile. Not the forced one she had worn at the wedding or during the weeks of waiting. This one was small, but real. She whispered to herself, "They may not see me. But I'm still here." For the first time in a long while, a small spark of warmth stirred in her chest. It wasn't joy, not yet. But it was something close. She looked down at the travel vouchers resting on her lap and traced the edges with her finger. Maybe it was time. Not for anyone else. Not for thanks or attention. Just for her. The thought was gentle, almost fragile, but it held steady inside her. She placed the letter back into its envelope and carefully set everything back into the box. But this time, she didn't push it to the back of the closet. She placed it on the nightstand beside her bed, where she could see it every morning when she woke up. Outside, the rain began to ease, and soft light broke through the clouds. She stood there for a moment longer, watching the light dance across the wet window pane. The world was still spinning, and maybe, just maybe, she could start spinning with it again. The next morning, she woke up with a sense of clarity she hadn't felt in months. The pain was still there, but it no longer controlled her. The emptiness that once filled her home now felt like open space, space she could use. She sat at the kitchen table, sipping her tea, and for the first time, she allowed herself to think differently. She didn't need anyone's permission to live. She didn't need to be seen to exist. She was still here. And she could still build something beautiful. She made a quiet appointment with a lawyer downtown. It was a small office, tucked between taller buildings, with a kind receptionist who offered her tea as she waited. When she sat down across from the lawyer, she spoke calmly, her voice steady. "I want to make some changes to my will," she said. The lawyer listened carefully as she explained. She shifted funds, redirected assets, and adjusted beneficiaries. She wasn't acting out of anger, she was simply protecting the little life she was now beginning to create for herself. "I've given enough," she said softly. "Now, I need to make sure what's left goes where it matters." The lawyer nodded respectfully and handled the paperwork. As she signed each page, she felt something loosen inside her, like invisible chains falling away one by one. After leaving the office, she drove to a small part of town she rarely visited. The rent was cheaper here, but the streets were alive with color and small businesses. That's where she saw it, a tiny empty storefront with large windows and a little for-lease sign taped to the glass. She parked the car and stepped inside. The space was small, but full of light. She could already imagine it filled with soft fabrics, elegant lace, and smiling faces. She used what was left of the wedding savings, the funds that hadn't been touched yet, to open a bridal boutique. But not just any boutique. This one had a name that meant something to her, Second Bloom. A simple name, but full of meaning. Flowers that bloom again after being cut down. A second chance. She didn't make announcements. She didn't post about it on social media. She didn't even tell her daughter. She simply worked. Quietly. Carefully. Calmly. At first, it was slow. A few curious brides wandered in, drawn by the soft glow of the shop's warm lighting and the delicate dresses displayed in the front window. She greeted them gently, offering tea and listening to their dreams. She helped each one find not just a dress, but a feeling, a sense of calm in the middle of their chaos. Word spread, little by little. Brides told their friends. Wedding planners started recommending her. Vendors she once hired for her daughter's wedding recognized her and referred clients her way. Every week, more women walked through her door, and every week, she helped them feel beautiful, listened to their stories, and gave them her full attention, the same care she once poured into her own daughter. The boutique slowly grew into something real, something strong. She hired a small staff, other women who needed a second chance, just like her. Together, they built a space full of soft music, laughter, and hope. Vendors complimented her eye for detail. Customers praised the warm, comforting energy of the shop. Reviews started to appear online, kind words from strangers who left feeling seen and valued. Month after month, Second Bloom grew stronger. She handled each decision with grace and thoughtfulness. She didn't chase success loudly, she allowed it to come naturally. The more she stayed calm and steady, the more the business flourished. The shop became a small gem in the city, a place brides trusted. A place built not on noise or attention, but on quiet strength. She would drive home at night, tired but fulfilled. The empty house no longer felt as lonely. It was her sanctuary now, a place of peace. She would light a candle, sip her tea, and reflect on the day's work. She didn't need loud victories. She didn't need applause. She had found power in her quiet rebuilding. One evening, as she locked up the boutique, she looked at the sign above the door. Second Bloom. The gentle glow of the soft white letters made her smile. She whispered to herself, I didn't need to raise my voice to win. And with that, she turned off the lights, locked the door, and walked into the calm night, knowing that her life was finally hers. The months turned into a year, and Second Bloom blossomed into something bigger than she had ever imagined. The boutique's soft, quiet charm attracted not just local brides but clients from nearby cities. Wedding planners fought to book appointments, and photographers started using the shop for styled shoots. Soon, a well-known bridal magazine featured Second Bloom in a glowing article, praising its warmth, personal touch, and beautiful gowns. The article included photos of her standing proudly inside her shop, surrounded by lace and soft light, her gentle smile radiating calm strength. She didn't seek the attention, but it found her. And when the magazine hit the shelves, her phone rang off the hook. Bookings surged. The waiting list grew. Her boutique had become one of the most sought after in the area. Every evening, she closed the shop with quiet satisfaction. She didn't brag. She didn't post boastful photos online. She simply worked, steady and calm, letting her success speak for itself. Then, one sunny afternoon, everything came full circle. The doorbell above the boutique chimed softly as it always did when a customer entered. She looked up from her desk, ready to greet whoever had walked in, but froze for a brief moment. There, standing in the doorway, was her daughter. At first, her daughter didn't recognize her. The woman behind the counter looked polished, confident. Her hair was styled neatly, her outfit elegant but simple, her posture calm. She carried herself like someone who had nothing to prove. Her daughter glanced around the boutique, admiring the gowns displayed on delicate mannequins. Wow, she said softly. This place is beautiful. She smiled politely, clearly not realizing who she was speaking to. I'm looking for a gown, her daughter continued. It's for my friend's wedding, or maybe for my vow renewal, we haven't decided yet. Everyone keeps recommending this place. They say it's the best. Her voice was cheerful, almost too casual, as if nothing had ever happened between them. But beneath her calm expression, the woman behind the counter could feel the tightness in her chest. The old pain threatened to surface for a brief moment, but she held it firmly in place. She smiled gently, steady and controlled. "We're fully booked," she said softly. Her daughter blinked, surprised. "Oh. I was hoping, maybe you could squeeze me in? It's kind of important." The calm smile never left her face. "I'm sorry. We have a long waiting list. Our schedule is full for the next 6 months." Her daughter shifted uncomfortably, trying to read her face. And then it happened. Recognition flickered in her daughter's eyes like a light switch turning on. She stared for a moment, mouth slightly open. "Mom?" The word hung awkwardly between them. She nodded slightly, still smiling, her voice quiet but clear. "Yes." There was a pause, a heavy, awkward silence that neither of them filled. Her daughter stood frozen, unsure of what to say. The confidence she had walked in with seemed to melt away. I didn't know this was your shop," her daughter said softly, her voice now hesitant. "I know," she replied, her voice steady as ever. "You wouldn't have come if you did." Her daughter's face flushed. She glanced around nervously, as if trying to find something to say, but the words wouldn't come. The roles had shifted, and for the first time, her daughter stood on unsteady ground. The woman behind the counter felt no anger. No rage. Only clarity. She had spent too many nights crying, too many days waiting for a call that never came. She had carried the weight of heartbreak quietly, built her life piece by piece in silence. And now, standing here in her own thriving business, she realized she didn't need anything from her daughter, not approval, not an apology, not even an explanation. Her voice remained calm. "I hope you find the perfect dress. But I can't help you." Her daughter opened her mouth, but no words followed. She simply stood there, caught between guilt and surprise. Without saying anything more, the woman gently returned to her work. She picked up a fabric sample and reviewed her notes, her hand steady and sure. Her daughter stood there for a few more seconds, then quietly turned and walked out, the doorbell chiming softly behind her. As the door closed, the boutique returned to its peaceful hum. She exhaled slowly, feeling a deep sense of release. Not triumph. Not revenge in the loud, dramatic sense. But something better, peace, dignity, and quiet power. She whispered to herself, barely audible, "I took everything back." And she had. The days after the encounter passed quietly. The shop remained busy, filled with laughter, soft music, and the gentle rustle of silk and lace. Brides came and went, appointments filled her schedule, and Second Bloom continued to flourish. Life moved forward, steady and calm, like a slow river gliding beneath the morning sun. Then the flowers started arriving. At first, she found them waiting at the boutique's front door one morning, a large bouquet of pale pink roses wrapped in soft white paper. There was a small card attached, written in a familiar handwriting. "I'm sorry, Mom. Can we talk?" She stood for a moment, staring at the bouquet. They were beautiful. But they didn't stir anything inside her. No anger, no tears. Just, nothing. She gently removed the card, read it once, and then folded it in half. Without hesitation, she walked to the back room and placed both the flowers and the card into the trash bin. The scent of roses filled the air briefly, but she didn't linger. The next day, another delivery arrived. This time lilies, with a longer note. "I've been thinking about you. I miss you. Please call me when you can." She read it calmly, her expression steady. The words didn't sting. They simply felt distant, like echoes from another life. She folded the card again, set the flowers aside, and continued her work. The messages began to appear on her phone too. First, a simple text, "Hey Mom." Then, hours later, "I know I've been distant. I want to fix things." She read each one as they arrived, her thumb hovering over the screen. But she never replied. Instead, she calmly deleted each message after reading it. The phone, once a source of waiting and disappointment, no longer held that power over her. Her ex-husband even called once. She saw his name flash across the screen, but she didn't answer. The call rang until it stopped on its own. She placed the phone face down and continued folding a delicate veil for one of her brides. She was no longer waiting by the phone. No longer hoping for words that once would have meant everything. She had spent years hoping, waiting, hurting. But that version of herself was gone now. The part of her that needed their approval, their attention, had quietly died long ago. What remained was peaceful, whole, and entirely her own. That evening, she returned home as usual. The house was still, but not empty. It was filled with the soft warmth of the life she had built. She lit a candle on the coffee table, the small flame flickering gently. The scent of lavender filled the room. She turned on the soft music she liked to play at night, letting the gentle piano notes drift through the air like a comforting embrace. She sat in her favorite chair, sipping her tea, watching the soft glow of the candle dance across the walls. The phone buzzed again on the table beside her. Another message from her daughter, "I love you. Please let's talk." She read it once. Her heart remained still. Not cold, but quiet. She gently deleted the message and placed the phone back down. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees. The world continued to spin, but she was no longer spinning with someone else's storm. She was rooted, steady, peaceful. There had been a time when those words would have pulled her back. A time when she would have answered immediately, desperate to mend what had been broken. But not anymore. She understood now that some wounds are not hers to heal. Some apologies arrived too late, after too many silences, after too many forgotten days. She closed her eyes and listened to the soft music, letting herself feel the quiet joy of this simple evening. The life she had rebuilt didn't need anyone's permission. It was hers alone, strong and calm. The candle flickered gently, its tiny flame steady in the still air. She whispered to herself, her voice soft, "I'm finally free." And she was. The soft afternoon light poured through the boutique's wide windows, filling the room with a warm golden glow. The gentle hum of quiet music played in the background, blending perfectly with the soft rustle of silk and chiffon as gowns swayed lightly on their hangers. The boutique felt calm, alive, and full of stories yet to unfold. She stood near the fitting area, observing as a young bride spun in front of the tall mirror, her dress flowing around her like a cloud. The bride's mother clapped her hands softly, her eyes glistening with happy tears. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," the mother whispered, reaching out to adjust a small fold of fabric on the bodice. The two women shared a tender moment, laughing softly as they admired the dress together. She watched them from a few steps away, her heart warm, but still. She didn't feel a sting of envy, nor a pull of sadness. Instead, there was peace, a gentle sense of acceptance she hadn't known before. The mother caught her eye for a brief second and smiled, a silent thank you for creating this place where such moments could exist. She returned the smile, small but genuine, and then quietly stepped aside, giving them space to continue their moment. As she walked toward her desk, her fingers lightly brushed against the delicate lace of a nearby gown. The fabric felt smooth beneath her hand, but her thoughts were elsewhere, floating softly in the space between past and present. There was a time when she had believed she was invisible. When the people she loved most treated her as if she were a shadow, standing quietly at the edge of their lives. She thought her value was measured by how much she gave, how much she sacrificed. When they stopped needing her, she thought it meant she had become a burden, a weight too heavy, no longer welcome. But standing here now, in the quiet hum of her boutique, she saw it differently. She hadn't been invisible. She had simply arrived early. Her strength wasn't something they couldn't see, it was something they didn't yet understand. She had carried the weight not because she was weak, but because she was strong enough to do so. She had been the roots while others admired the flowers above. And when the storm came, she had held firm while everything else swayed. Her journey hadn't been easy. The late nights, the lonely mornings, the unanswered calls, they had shaped her. The silence that once crushed her had, over time, carved out space for something beautiful to grow. She hadn't disappeared. She had simply grown beyond what they could see. Now, as she watched other mothers and daughters share moments she once dreamed of, she felt no bitterness. She was no longer trapped by what might have been. She had built something that no one could take from her. Something that came from her hands, her patience, and her quiet, steady heart. The boutique was more than a business. It was a reflection of her own second bloom. Every gown that hung on the racks carried a piece of her story. Every happy bride that walked out the door added another layer of light to her life. And every evening she locked the door behind her, she carried with her the quiet satisfaction of a life reclaimed. She no longer needed anyone's validation to feel whole. She no longer measured her worth through anyone else's eyes. She had found peace in her own reflection, strength in her own breath. As the bride and her mother laughed softly from the fitting area, she whispered to herself, "Maybe I wasn't the burden after all." The words floated in the warm air like a soft prayer, not bitter, not angry, just true. Her strength had always been there. And now, it shone brighter than any dress in the room. She straightened a few hangers on a nearby rack, glanced one last time at the mother and daughter still lost in their moment, and smiled again, fully, gently, completely. The boutique hummed with quiet life. And so did she. The sun dipped low, casting a soft orange glow through the boutique's wide windows. The shop had closed for the day. The lights were dimmed, leaving only the gentle glow of the evening sun and a small lamp by the corner table. The air smelled faintly of fresh flowers, lilies, roses, and baby's breath arranged in a simple glass vase at the center of the table. She moved through the quiet space, her footsteps light, steady. The gowns stood silently on their racks, their soft fabric swaying gently in the breeze from the small fan nearby. The music had been turned off, leaving only the peaceful hush of the evening. On the table sat a single plate with a slice of cake, a cup of tea steaming gently beside it. The kind of cake she always used to serve at her daughter's birthdays, the same one she had once cut and passed around while everyone else celebrated. Back then, she never had time to enjoy it herself. She was always in the kitchen, always cleaning, always making sure everyone else had their fill. But tonight was different. Tonight, there was no crowd. No chatter. No demands pulling her in a dozen directions. No one deciding where she should sit or what color she should wear. There was no tension, no whispered judgments, no silent disappointments. Only calm. Only her. She sat down slowly at the table, folding her hands in her lap for a moment, breathing in the quiet. She glanced at the flowers, the simple beauty of them. She had picked them herself earlier that morning. Not for anyone else, for her. Because she wanted to. The boutique hummed softly around her. The space she had built from nothing, from heartbreak, from silence. Each gown, each detail, each piece of fabric carried her fingerprint. Her story. She no longer wondered why they hadn't called, why they hadn't come back, why they hadn't seen her before. That part of her life was finished. The waiting, the hoping, it was all behind her now. She had stopped standing at doors that would never open. She had found another way in. She had made her own seat at her own table. She picked up the fork and cut into the soft cake, lifting a small piece to her mouth. The sweetness filled her senses as she closed her eyes, letting the taste settle on her tongue. It was rich, soft, comforting. Her lips curved into a peaceful smile. Not one she forced, not one she practiced. A real one. In this quiet moment, she felt it fully, her freedom. The kind of freedom that doesn't need permission. The kind that grows quietly after the storm has passed. She had once been overlooked, pushed aside, dismissed. But none of that mattered anymore. She was no longer waiting to be chosen, no longer hoping for a seat at someone else's table. She had built her own. And it was enough. The phone sat face down on the counter across the room. She didn't glance at it. She didn't need to. There was nothing left to hear that could add to this moment. The silence was her companion now, and it felt like peace. The candle flickered gently in the corner, casting warm shadows along the walls. The boutique smelled of fresh flowers and soft vanilla. Everything was as it should be. She whispered softly to herself, the words gentle but strong, "This time, I ate at my table. Alone, and free." And she did.